The Kremlin contradicted itself about the peace plan Donald Trump presented the previous day. Today, the State Duma of the Russian Federation stated that Russia should not agree to the new proposal from the United States of America for achieving peace with Ukraine, because it is allegedly a provocation that will not lead to a real end to the war. And in general, this is Trump's scheming. It's some kind of cunning plan to weaken Russia and then defeat it. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the Kremlin received Trump's peace plan and that Russia was ready to be flexible about a peaceful settlement in Ukraine. But he quickly added that the Kremlin is generally satisfied with the special military operations progress, hinting that Russia is ready to keep fighting and achieve its goals by military means, sacrificing several 100,000 more Russians on Ukrainian soil. And it's funny how Putin, in his address, mentions Kupiansk several times, which he supposedly has already completely captured. But that's not true. And Putin boasted that if Ukraine and Europe don't agree to Trump's plan, then after Kupiansk, the next target could be, for example, almost Lisbon. And he immediately added that it's Ukraine. And European countries don't want to accept the peace plan proposed by United States President Donald Trump, because they still hope to achieve a strategic victory. At the same time, in Europe, they advise Steve Witkoff, who worked with the Russian Dmitriev, to see a psychiatrist. Because he is talking complete nonsense in this peace plan, which is now being discussed publicly all over the world. My name is Alexei Pechi, let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, write a detailed comment under this episode, and also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. In addition, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. Amid growing reports on Donald Trump's peace plan, the Kremlin has begun putting on a show. At first, they insisted that they had no idea what peace plan was being discussed and hadn't received anything like that. They then denied that the American military planned to visit Moscow for negotiations after being in Kiev. But in the end, they finally admitted that there is a peace plan, they received it, and they are ready to follow it. It's now known that it was written by the Russian and Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev. But they had to put on a show, otherwise they wouldn't be Russians who simply can't live without lying. And now, contradictory messages are coming from the Kremlin. I'll start with Vladimir Putin's address, which he made the day before. There was a lot of nonsense in that address, but it was clearly addressed to Donald Trump, who is now actively pressuring Ukraine and Europe for us to give in to the Russian aggressor. And Putin is trying to reinforce these messages with his threats. I'll explain what I mean now. For example, just yesterday Donald Trump said that if Zelensky and the European leaders don't accept his peace plan, the fighting will have to continue. And supposedly it will be terrible and bad. And in general, in that case, Ukraine will definitely lose. That's a quote from Trump. He, meaning Zelensky, will have to love this deal if he doesn't like it. They just have to keep fighting. And then Putin picks up this message and declares that the Russian army has already completely captured Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region, which isn't true. But Putin's message is very simple. He pretends to be confident, assuring that Russia can keep fighting. And if Ukraine and Europe don't make concessions, then Moscow will even capture European capitals, just like they've supposedly captured Kupiansk now. He doesn't say this directly because he's too cowardly, but that's the message. You'll see soon. I'll give you some quotes next. Putin claims Trump's peace plan, discussed before the Alaska meeting, was developed long ago. During the discussion, the American side asked Russia to compromise and be flexible. Quote, during the negotiations in Anchorage, we confirmed that, despite certain difficult issues, challenges and so on, we nevertheless agree with these proposals and are ready to show the flexibility that was suggested to us. Following the Alaska negotiations, the American side paused, and we know that this is connected to Ukraine's actual rejection of the peace settlement plan proposed by President Trump. That's why a new version appeared. Essentially a modernized plan consisting of 28 points. So at this stage, Putin is saying, listen, all our demands that went as far as Alaska are included in this plan, just rewritten a bit. Putin then admits he has already received Trump's peace plan, at least in some form. According to him, it could serve as the basis for a final peace settlement. But, quote, "This text is not being discussed with us in detail because the American administration has not been able to secure the agreement of the Ukrainian side. Ukraine is against it. The position of Ukraine and its European allies is due to the lack of objective information about the real situation on the battlefield. Neither in Ukraine nor in Europe do they understand what this could ultimately lead to." Here, Putin is already starting to reinforce Trump's messages, saying, "Sign the deal, otherwise the war will get even worse and you'll lose even more." Then Putin starts, very subtly, to threaten Europe, using Kupiansk as an example. Quote, "The most recent example is Kupiansk. On November 4th, it was publicly stated in Kiev that there were no more than 60 Russian servicemen in this city. And within the next few days, this city will be completely unblocked by Ukrainian forces. But I want to inform you that even at that time, the city of Kupiansk was almost entirely in the hands of the Russian armed forces. The fate of the city had already been finally decided at that moment. What does this mean?" asks Putin. Either the Kiev armed leaders don't have objective information about the situation at the front, or, having it, they simply aren't able to assess it objectively. And here comes the key quote from Vladimir Putin, which on one hand convinces Donald Trump that Russia is ready to fight forever. So is it really better to make all the concessions that Putin is demanding? Well, because Russia could keep fighting for almost 10 more years. On the other hand, this is also a message to Europe. Like, agree to Ukraine's capitulation now, otherwise Russia will start attacking European countries. Here's the next quote. Listen carefully. Putin says if Kyiv doesn't want to discuss President Trump's proposal and refuses to do so, then both they and the European warmongers are responsible. They must understand that the events that happened in Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas of the front. Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but inevitably this will keep happening. This works for us, as it helps achieve the special military operations goals militarily. Let me briefly remind you here, the plan proposed by the United States contains a number of serious concessions to Moscow, which had previously been repeatedly rejected in Kiev. Among them is the transfer of the entire Donbas to Russia, including territories that Russia cannot capture. The document also calls for reducing the size of the armed forces of Ukraine by almost 2.5 times. Ukraine's refusal to join NATO, a ban on the deployment of foreign peacekeepers in Ukraine, and the establishment of the country's non-nuclear status. In return, Russia will see sanctions gradually lifted and the G8 format restored. Plus, complete and total amnesty for all war crimes committed during the entire period of the war. After all this, the State Duma of the Russian Federation decided to further amplify the message. They say that Ukraine and Europe must immediately, right now, agree to Trump's peace proposal before Russia changes its mind. Like, Russia could change its mind tomorrow, so let's hurry up. That's why Trump wants everything done quickly before the 27th, sign and move on. So no one has time to see what's happening. And in Russia, there's this guy, the deputy chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Alexei Zhuravlyov. And today he came out with this quote: "Russia should not agree to the new United States proposal for achieving peace with Ukraine, because it's a provocation that won't lead to a real end to the war. The conflict can be fully resolved only in the case of our clear victory on the front and Ukraine's capitulation. In any other outcome, the confrontation will just be postponed." The American idea is to keep Ukraine as a deterrent factor against Russia. Even if it is reduced both territorially and militarily, it will still pose a significant threat to us, and we will have to keep an army on the western borders. The United States, therefore, will have its hands free for the upcoming confrontation with China. I hope that the Russian side will not agree to such provocations. In general, Russia will do everything in the coming days to show that it basically doesn't care about this peace plan. And they're actually ready to keep fighting and capturing places like Kupiansk, but if Ukraine agrees, then so be it. And they agree. And this really fuels Trump's statement, who hints that this peace plan is actually the only plan to resolve the war. And if it isn't adopted quickly, then either the Kremlin will change its mind and not agree to it, or we'll have to keep fighting. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye. To be continued.